of last 6 months, tens of thousands of students who were opposed to Yunus and his allies were attacked inside campuses, even barred from attending examinations, denied of academic rights, and their certificates have been cancelled by university authorities. Only because of political belief or alignment with Awami League's student wing, scores of students were murdered, abducted from their home, and even thrown behind the bars. Now the questions over Yunus gaining undue privileges to expand business empire.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite Dr. Rayan Rashid, who is a human rights lawyer, to address the session.
Distinguished audience, just a few weeks ago, in a quiet village in Bangladesh, a young girl was raped. Her father, seeking justice for his daughter, went to the police. Days later, she was murdered by the very men he had accused of harming her. There is this haunting image of that girl standing by her father's side. She is not crying, she is simply scared, as it is asking us. Should I now seek justice for what the country or for what the country? These are the impossible questions being asked by young earth in today's life. I speak to you as a witness and as a chronicler who has documented conversations in office. I speak to you as someone who believes institutions such as these must act when justice is necessary, because inactions carry consequences. Since 8th August, under the leadership of Nobel Peace Laureate Dr. Awami, Bangladesh has entered a period of alarming human rights decline. Attacks on religious and ethnic minorities, Hindus, Christians, Sufis, Armenians have intensified. Transgender and LGBT communities have faced rising hostility. Political officers, journalists have been silent, detained, or forced to silence. Political states, the freedom of expression must strengthen. These are not isolated events. They are part of a wider pattern of intimidation, of impunity, and of fear. Lawyers, judges, and even accused individuals have been attacked, including in court premises. The judiciary is increasingly seen as under executive pressure. Trust in the justice system is failing. Mob violence continues, sexual violence skyrocketing. Hundreds of convicts, including those charged with terrorism, have been released. Over 450 police stations have been attacked. Weapons looted from these stations are now with extremist groups. While some investigations may be underway, few have resulted in transparent prosecutions. Impunity appears systemic. Yet, Dr. Yunus, the interim government, continues to deny and dismiss these claims. Dr. Yunus himself claimed these are all propaganda, these are all disinformation. But Dr. Yunus is no ordinary political figure. He carries a global image, a Nobel Peace Laureate, a reformer, a man above reproach. At least that's what the world thinks of him. This lends his denials a weight that obscures the truth. Clearly, moral prestige does not equal moral infallibility. We have seen that. On the other hand, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights conducted an inquiry, but that has been widely criticized for its flawed methodology, bias, and a form of network capture. It is seen not as a neutral investigation, but as a report shaped by a narrow range of voices aligned with those in power today. International civil society actors has also fallen short. Some organizations too late and too late. Many of us reached out in good faith, but we were met with silence. If facts are judged by who delivers them, truth becomes negotiable. So today I make three points. First, that all alleged human rights violations, past and present, be investigated independently and impartially. Second, that the United Nations conduct a full internal review into the UNHRC inquiry, its process, its findings, and networks of influence. And third, that the United States Congress hold a hearing into allegations of previous U.S. administration's interference in the regime change of Bangladesh. Distinguished delegates, we have seen this before in Indonesia, Iran, and in Syria. Let us not add Bangladesh to that list. That young girl, standing by her father's grave, is no longer just a victim. She has become a metaphor for today's Bangladesh. Violated, grieved, unheard, but still standing, still waiting. Let the world not be afraid. Let's not fail. Let the world not fail. Thank you.
Very much. Dr. Brian Rashid, rights lawyer. We move now to our next panelist for her remarks, the award-winning investigative journalist and documentary filmmaker, Ms. Zahar.
Thanks very much for having me here. Very sad. Nevertheless, it's very innocent people's lives and the future of the nation is in danger. So it's important for us to be having these discussions and keeping it alive. As a part of my job, I have traveled to so many countries. I've reported from over 40 countries around the world, including Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Nicaragua, and what I saw happening in Bangladesh is terrifying, scary, similar to what I've seen happen in these countries, especially post-revolution. Often with revolutions, people think the first thing to do is
মামা মাকে দাও, আমি একটু কাজ করতেছি, যাও মাকে দাও, তুমি কথা বলো।
Now, I went to Bangladesh end of September, early October 2024, shortly after the outset of Sheikh Hasina's government of the student protests. I went there because I was keeping an eye on the news, and the whole world was rushing. People, students were protesting, they were getting attacked in the streets, and the world was suddenly paying attention. But when the government was ousted and I went there, it was extraordinary. Walking around the streets, I could see graffitis, murals on the walls about the success, about the sacrifices made where so many people lost their lives. And speaking to activists, journalists on the ground, they were happy. They felt like for the first time in a very long time they could speak openly without censoring themselves. And it was impossible to miss that hope on people's faces. You could see that they were hopeful for a better future for their country, so that all of the sacrifices they made wasn't for nothing. But beneath that hope, something very sinister was shining. Like, you couldn't ignore it. It was simmering beneath the surface. Which brings me to why I went to Bangladesh in the first place. After the outset of the Sheikh Hasina government, loads of videos, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, started flooding social media. First, it was people attacking the houses, the offices of people who were a part of the Awami. People didn't care. They thought they were part of the corruption and part of what people fought for. We don't care. But then we started getting reports and videos of normal people, citizens, their houses being attacked. these attacks are towards a lot of minorities, really, and the LGBT community. But I think this is very interesting because attacks against them has kind of been defined with Bangladesh's history since the formation of that region. It's been intensifying recently, but then after the revolution, most of them were getting attacked. There were reports of another report about a teacher having been attacked, so on and so forth. And suddenly the world was like, what is going on? And of course, the outrage in the Hindu majority neighboring India was public. But they started, the far-right Indian media started releasing a lot of footage, a lot of videos that were fake news. So amongst hundreds of actual legitimate attacks that people in the villages in Bangladesh were thinking about what was happening to them, a lot of videos that were fake, that were irrelevant, that were from years ago started to play. And that irresponsible reporting, a lot of the victims I spoke about around Bangladesh is the reason that the world, the BBC, did a really great investigation debunking. But what they failed to acknowledge is that a lot of these reports of these attacks are legitimate. People are getting attacked. Yes, there is fake news, but then there's also lots of legitimate. But after the BBC is debunking these videos at the zero. And then other publications come. And then the world was like, this is a part of the DJ's propaganda, we're not paying them attention. As we all know, it's a very complicated finding. And that has left many, many people desperate. I want to start talking about the context. You all know, I'm sure, there is a lot to read about. I want to talk about some of the people I spoke to, and some of the people I spoke to. Can we have the slide with the photos, please? These two are two young PhD students from Awami and Geneva. They're childhood friends, best friends. They grew up in a tiny village. And they were a part of the protests that got rid of the sheikhs. They lost their friends in the revolution. But after these attacks began, first they put one of the leaders, then on his father, the Dawg guy. His father's house was attacked. And that's when it came to that these attacks are real. Even in the country, when he went back to his village to protect his father, he started seeing with his own eyes. He saw temples getting burned, houses getting burned, people, women, children being attacked. And so these two, along with their friends, gave up everything, gave up their studies, everything. And they made it their life go and document these atrocities so that the world knows. Because the journalists were there, domestic journalists, nor international journalists. And the government, with the policing vacuum, and the Asian government wanting to show like they're in control, they weren't really dealing with these attacks. So I started following them around the country. Can I see the next slide, please? This house, this was the first village they took. This village was enough for me to have seen and witnessed the pain, the videos that people were talking about. 17 houses, and 3 tensions in this village, in this Hindu majority village, were burned. This is just one of them. 17 houses. In each house, several families live together. They had started building some of them, but many of them were abandoned, like this one. The family were so terrified to come back that they had just gone and hid away because they feared their lives. Because villagers told me that they're continuing to get threats. They sent their 17-year-old boy there just to be able to fix their things. And then I went to the neighbor's house, and I have the next one. This man, his house was his life's work. He had worked all of his life to be able to make this house. 4 or 5 weeks later, look at it. Even his dinner was on the floor, his medicine was on the floor. He was crying, he was like, what do I do? I have no more money to build this, I don't even have the power of energy, this was my life's work, what do I do? Why did they attack us? And he believes it's because they're Hindus. I went to several different of the 17 houses, and interestingly enough, every single one of them were Hindus. 2 of them were Muslim families. But they told me they were attacked of the giving shelter to their neighbors. And I challenged them. I was like, I went there skeptical. I was like, how do you know they attacked you because you sheltered them? And they were telling me, they were shouting, you shelter the Hindus, and this is what you did. We're short on time, so I'm just gonna quickly go through a couple more. Can I see the next one? This is the Eden Baptist temple. He's praying there. And I also went to several different temples, and they said that they're coming up with people's gods. Because in desperate times, can we have the phones in silence? This is very distracting. Thank you. Anyway, they told me that they are coming after their gods because in desperate times you turn to God. If your gods are attacked, then who do you turn to? Can I see the next one, please? Thank you. This is one of the temple complexes I visited. They have taken the crematorium out of the ground and set every single one of the temples within the complex on fire. You couldn't see anything. They had put graffitis, they had dirt, a lot of this. They had destroyed it. They had gone out of their way. The people on the ground told me to send a message. Next one. This village, I went there. The night before I got there, the barn had been set on fire. The people, there are some really horrific photos that I'm not able to show you because they're really graphic. People were too scared to even speak to me on the record because they feared that they have no protection. They told me they called the police, but then the police don't come. They called the army, but they're short-staffed. They feel like they've been abandoned. Next. This wasn't supposed to be here, it's too boring. Maybe let's pass it and then I'll tell you about this. Yeah. And finally, I'll tell you about, you can hear about that guy in my report. This woman is the mother, like many other mothers, of young Bangladeshis who feel like they don't have a place left in Bangladesh and they're trying to escape to neighboring India or other countries. And of course, a lot of them end up dead. It's scary. 1 week before I spoke to her, about 10 days, she had lost her 14-year-old son who was so scared of these attacks that he tried to stay. And they found him by the other border. Now, you can look into why these attacks are happening. It's very complex. I spoke to the police, to the head of one of the head of the police. He denied that these attacks are religiously motivated. I spoke to several Islamic leaders who all seem to want a Taliban-style rule for Bangladesh. And a lot of them have huge followings on social media. And the victims I spoke to say that it's rhetoric by people like them that is intensifying what they're going through, and people are terrified. Now, meeting victims was so easy. I visited about 9 villages and I spoke to dozens of families who every single one of them scarred in different ways. They've lost their family members, they've had their houses burned to the ground. It was really easy. You could literally go everywhere. But meeting people who are committed to supporting these attacks, or at least taking part in it, was virtually impossible. So I had to get bold. And the 2 young students that I told you took me to a temple complex that used to be a temple complex. And 3 weeks before I arrived there, they had attacked that temple complex, burnt it to the ground, and made a makeshift mosque on top of it. That was the only place I had a chance of speaking to people who might be supportive of the attacks. Without me telling you what happened, I'm going to play an audio of when I went to try and speak to them, just to be able to show you the reality. And I must say, I usually make films. The reason I made this into podcast documentaries is because the subject is so sensitive, people are so scared that we wouldn't have the capacity to capture all of those voices. Instead, let's focus on what's happening and what they're saying.
13 sixes to the second Mr. 5 and I'll take 11 sixes. Just look at the number 1. 38. Difference of 25 sixes from the second position. How absolutely magnificent is that? And this is up and over once again and will go the distance. The Another
That's
6.
so
6 now, 9.
that gave me.
That's really not good bowling, it's in the slot.
There is also another crematorium where a mosque was made by the terrorists.
They made a mosque in a Hindu crematorium.
Yes, and they changed the president and secretary not to hold this crematorium. They will kill the president and the secretary.
We arrived in Blogenville, Griswold, in Kapuga district. Just weeks before, a Hindu crematorium in Blogen Central stood right here.
This crematorium was used by the Hindus to burn dead body, but the Muslims of this area made a mosque in that place.
In place of the Hindu crematorium, now stands a small mosque. Its newly built tin roof and brick walls, a stark replacement. Outside, a handful of men in a young conversation. One of them unmistakably dressed as an imam.
I am worrying about our security. That's why I don't want to just risk anyone's life.
To avoid inflaming tensions, we park our car a short distance away, taking care to conceal my recording equipment. Bonamani, Shrikanta and I wait in the car, while our local producer Sakib cautiously approaches the mosque to gauge if the men are willing to talk. So I'm inside of the car and my local producer has stepped outside to speak to the community. Suddenly out of nowhere, lots of people came and they're all very, very angry, emotions are high. So my local producer is currently talking to them. There's a lot of shouting. I'm staying inside of the car for now for our safety. Within minutes, things escalate. From inside the car, we're watching disbelief as the small group swells into a mob of hundreds. The mood turns menacing. Suddenly, Sakib is being punched and kicked as he scrambles back towards the car. We try to escape, but it's too late. Bricks are jammed under our tires, and our car keys are snatched away, along with our phones. We're stranded. Trapped, we sit frozen inside the car, watching in horror. A few individuals attempt to calm the furious mob, but others press forward, pelting the car with bricks and stones, their shouts dripping with venom. Some spit against the windows. My heart pounds, and then a chilling silence falls over the crowd. We see a group of men carrying a bag. One word cuts through the murmurs. Gasoline.
I think this got cut short, but I'll tell you one thing. 3 hours later, we had sent our coordinates to the authorities. They did come and get us eventually. They were about to set our car on fire. The thing that saved us is out of this mob of about 300, a small portion of them were trying to protect us. I remember I was in the car and they were trying to drag me out, and I was like, not letting go. Those people saved my life because they knew the car was about to be set on fire. The reason I ended my documentary on this, and I really ask you to go and listen to it, is to show that not everybody in Bangladesh wants the same thing. There is a huge mob mentality going on right now, but just because the majority are acting, the people with the loudest voices are acting in a certain way doesn't mean they will want the same way. And it's a very terrifying time. Just because we're not hearing the voices of victims or people on the ground doesn't mean they're not suffering, doesn't mean they're not screaming for help. It's because no one is giving them a platform or they're being silenced. So thank you so much all for being here, and let's keep an eye out and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sahar Zhang, for that very powerful speech. We now cross over to our keynote speaker, Mr. Paul Bristol.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think it might just be helpful at the start to explain why I'm here. So, I'm not here to cast judgment on any regime in Bangladesh, either past or present or future. But when I was Member of Parliament in the UK, obviously
my expectation would always be that I would focus on the constitution. Because of the nature of the constituency I represented, 140 different languages spoken, lots of different people fleeing areas of the world for poor human rights record, I suddenly became someone who spoke quite often about human rights, whether that was in Kashmir, whether it was in Gaza, where I lost my government job for speaking out in Gaza, whether it was being an advocate for the Zaras who faced persecution in Afghanistan, East Timor, Sudan, and of course Bangladesh. And human rights have defined my politics ever since. But I've been to Bangladesh, and it's thought it would be useful just to give my reports about what I felt when I went to Bangladesh. There are two sides and two faces of it. One is good, 6% growth, year after year in recent years. With huge strides out of poverty. Female education, which is, I think, one of the best things we can do in the world right now. We relieve suffering. Female education, educating girls. A child whose mother can read is 50% more likely to live past the age of 5, and twice as likely to go to school themselves. With just one additional school year, a woman's earnings increased by 5th. And I saw that. Huge strides were taken in the education of women. And I also saw the kindness in Bangladesh. One of the biggest human rights disasters, the biggest refugee camp in the world is in Bangladesh, in Cox's Bazar, the Rohingya refugee camp. Its biggest refugee emergency into Syria was there in Bangladesh. And I've been there since for a long period, 2017. And I've been there myself. I remember seeing a man who took me around his shelter, told me how proud of very little that he had. Very little that he had. And it's worth noting, yes, the work there is supported by the UNHRC, and without them, we would have lots poorer outcomes for refugees and Rohingyas in Bangladesh, and of course, the fled Myanmar because of persecution in Myanmar. But if it wasn't for those people, and so when I talk about it, so there's two sides of it, two sides of it. The kindness of Bangladesh. The other side, of course, is corruption. The other side is using the law as a political weapon rather than reason or argument. And of course, human rights abuses. These aren't new. These didn't all occur just after all this before. But there's a deteriorating security situation. One has to recognise that. The questions that I would ask, I've only got a very brief period of time. The questions that I would ask is what happens to the economic growth in Bangladesh that's occurred in recent years if the security situation, the human rights situation, what happens to the rights of minorities in Bangladesh if the security situation and human rights situation is improving in Bangladesh? And what will happen to those women who are being educated in progress in Bangladesh? And the experience of girls in Bangladesh, if the security situation, the human rights situation is expected, and the security situation doesn't improve. And what happens to the Rohingya refugees? Over 1 million of them in Cox's Bazar, one of the beautiful parts of Bangladesh. You've never seen it. What happens to them if Bangladesh slides into chaos? Human rights Bangladesh is a country with 2 sides. Yes, lots of potential, lots of hope. And I hope that was seen by many. Sahar said, what people did see that beacon of hope from what happened in the future. But our beacon of hope also represented by potential, growth that I saw, the education of girls and women. What happens to that beacon of hope? A glimmer of light. Plus,
Thank you very much indeed to Mr. Paul Bristow. I'd like to thank all of our panellists. Now, unfortunately, due to time constraints, we're not going to have too much time to question, but maybe a question or two quickly. If somebody in the room would like to put their hand up. Sir, over there, please state your question quickly and we'll get the panel's comment.
Thank you for the Our situation in Bangladesh is very unstable. recently there has been a lot of arrests of innocent businessmen, human rights activists, journalists being arrested unlawfully. There has been a massive increase in underage rape, robbery, and as a British citizen, I feel unsafe and unsecure to travel to my motherland with my family. Law and order at its highest corruption rate. To the panel, when will I feel safe to travel to my motherland again with my family? Thank you very much.
When will I feel safe to travel to my motherland again? You need to be brief, but anybody on the panel would like to answer that question? Paul, Sahar?
I mean, I went there. I didn't particularly feel unsafe. I went there, I didn't particularly feel unsafe, but I am a foreign national who got looked very bad for the country if something happened to me. And unfortunately, the attention I got, even though it took about 3 hours and I couldn't go to work at that time, is a lot quicker than what many people will notice. I think it's important to remember that it's not like visible. The problem that people are actually facing there is so much more extreme than that. And we need to really understand how violent the situation is.
Thank you very much. One very quick question, sir.
Today is the 54th Independence Day anniversary for Bangladesh. On this day, West Pakistan forces, along with the local collaborators, initiated one of the worst possible genocide in this century. My question to the panel is the world, are we sleepwalking and going back 54 years? Thank you.
Sir, would you like to comment?
Well, I hope not, because when I think about this, the only thing that I saw was potential. But I'm not ignorant. I know there were 2 sides to Bangladesh. I remember sitting down with human rights, sitting down with the High Commissioner of Bangladesh back then, the issue. If that situation is deteriorating, then it's just a huge missed opportunity for Bangladesh. There's nothing but potential for that country. It can be a significant player in the future. It's beholden on the international community to protect the rights of those who have been persecuted and to ensure that that potential is there and we can lift those millions of people out of poverty and educate women and girls.
And that's where we leave it. And I'm just going to throw to the chair to say thank you and to close the session.
It was really informative and
হ্যালো, এখন তো জি আসলো
اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا